Welcome everyone to the 2015 Toyota Mart 350 at Sonoma race review, where I recap what went on Sonoma, everything that went down in the pre-race, and trust me, there was a lot going on in the world of NASCAR leading up to this weekend and also next weekend, which is also going to have a lot of big news because it is Daytona, which is considered to be one of the big wildcard events of the 2015 regular season. And also it's NBC's return to NASCAR. And I will also be talking a little bit about that as well. But anyway, where to start? All right, my thoughts on the race. I thought that this was a pretty good race, to be honest. Like I would probably put it maybe in my top 5 or 6 best races of the season so far. But chances are that's probably going to change because I'm doing this race review. I think I'm doing this race review like maybe like 3 to 4 hours after the race concluded on Fox Sports 1. But I thought that it was a pretty good race. I felt like that, and I think also this might have just been my favorite Sonoma race I've actually ever seen. I felt like that, for me, I guess it was kind of nice to watch a race where even though, yes, we did see many drivers that we've seen dominate many races so far this season up front, Jimmy Johnson and Kurt Busch, for example. But to me, it kind of felt nice to kind of have maybe like a race where it was like the rules package was not going to be that much of a factor in the race. There wasn't going to be this whole like aerodynamic aero push thing. And so to me, having those issues aside, I think that it was kind of nice to watch a race like that. And I think that to me, Sonoma is to me more of a technical track than Watkins Glen, in my opinion. So I think maybe while we definitely saw at Sonoma, maybe we won't see that as much as at Watkins Glen unless they use the new rules package that they're going to debut at Kentucky at Watkins Glen, which is probably never going to happen. But anyway, as far as the winner goes, I was really surprised that Kyle Busch was able to pull this one off. Like I think like all day, Kyle Busch, yes, he did have a pretty good car. I don't think he had the car. Like, I don't think that he had like the fastest and the best car, but I thought that Kyle Busch was one of the strongest competitors. And I honestly thought that when Kyle Busch, Clint Bowyer, and many others came on pit road with, I don't know, like 12, 10 laps to go, I thought that strategy was not actually going to work out just because Jimmy Johnson, who was the leader at the time, had a really strong car all race long. He was up front, and then he also had a couple drivers who stayed out with him that were just going to be interferences. And so I was surprised about how fast like the drivers on pressure tires were able to navigate their way and pass all of the drivers, and then drivers like Kyle Busch, Clint Bowyer, and Kurt Busch were all able to pass Johnson pretty quickly. And then once Johnson was out of the picture, I kind of hate that I got this feeling, but it all of a sudden, like, even though I'm a Johnson fan, it does make the race interesting just because I think many fans want to see new winners, and we want to see drivers that we don't necessarily think about as drivers to win. And I think that's what we saw, not just with Kyle Busch, but also Clint Bowyer. This is the best race Clint Bowyer has ever had, based on what I saw, and when we look at his stats overall this season, he has just it's been a pretty tough year for him. And not only was this his first top 5, it was also MWR's first top 5. And MWR as a whole, Clint Bowyer and David Reagan, obviously Reagan did get into a crash and got into a little bit of a controversy with Martin Truex Jr., but David Reagan, he had a top 10 car as well. And also there were a couple other drivers that had some good runs going that maybe they didn't exactly get the finish that I think they deserved, but it was nice to see that. And I think one of the reasons why we're able to see that is just because Sonoma is a wild card. Like, I think heading into the season, and especially in the past month or two, I think in the regular season there were 3 tracks that many people would say are wild cards in the regular season: Sonoma, Daytona, and Watkins Glen. 2 road courses and a super speedway. And I think while the winner wasn't exactly like a wild card, like, oh my goodness, totally unexpected winner, it was kind of a wild card in the sense of Kyle Busch, a driver that really, like, he does have four road course wins, but to me, Sonoma, as far as I can remember, is kind of a hit or miss track with him, as far as I can remember. Like, he won in 2008, but then since then, up until today, I don't really think he's really made that much of a mark when it comes to Sonoma races. And so because of that, I think Kyle Busch was indeed a wild card. Clint Bowyer wasn't to me also a wild card, just because, like I said, a tough season, but got a really good finish. And then of course this race is to me also going to be a race to remember, as not only were there a couple of firsts, such as Kyle Busch's first one since his injuries, and the first ever uh, one to finish by Busch brothers. It was also a couple of last, like the last race on Fox for the season, and also Larry McReynolds' last race in the Fox Sports booth. And I kind of feel like that I think that is going to be tough to watch next year, and from there on, not having Larry McReynolds, just because I think Larry McReynolds, I think that he is one of the best announcers or analytics that we really ever had in NASCAR. Period. But that is just my opinion, and to me, it does kind of suck to see that. Obviously, he will still be a part of NASCAR on Fox. He'll just be in the Hollywood hotel. But I think that, and this is no hate or just or me mean to Jeff Gordon. I think Jeff Gordon will do a good job. I think maybe things won't be as focused. Maybe if you understand what I'm talking about, like chances are, it might like there may not exactly be as much focus on the action, because I felt like that's what Larry McReynolds was really able to do. I think that he was really able to keep yourself focused on what's going on in the race. And I think that with Jeff Gordon in the booth, chances are I have a feeling it was going to be less than that. But I think that it's not going to be the end of the world for NASCAR and NASCAR on Fox. So anyway, that's all I got to say on my thoughts about this race and speaking overall. And now let's get into what happened leading up to this race. And I gotta say, this is probably there were a lot of big headlines, probably some of the biggest pre-race headlines of the season. And one of them, which this one wasn't really like a big headline, but it's the first thing I wrote down, is a crew chief change for the number 3 car, which is driven by Austin Dillon. A new crew chief change. Richard Slugger-Lave will be Austin Dillon's new crew chief. And the original crew chief, Gil Martin, is going to be moved to the research and development for Richard Childress Racing. Or I think he's also, which I think is another word for crew chief, like I think that he'll be the crew chief for anytime Brian Scott, Ty Dillon, etc. drives the 33 car, which is a part-time ride. And I think that when it comes to this, I don't know how much this really will affect I don't know how much this crew chief change will affect, like. And I think Sonoma is not exactly a good indicator to how the relationship is going, just because Sonoma, I don't think, is anywhere near Austin Dillon's best or even average racetrack. We'll have to see how well he performs, especially at Daytona, and from there on outward. But I don't think we should judge their performance based on this weekend's race. And Richard Slugger, he has had a lot of success. Like, he's won races. He won the. I remember him best for winning the 2003 Daytona 500 when he was the crew chief for Michael Waltrip. That's what I am, and I think many others remember him best for. And obviously, he has had a lot of experience, so maybe all the experience might help him and Austin Dillon maybe start getting better finishes. Like, I think like Austin Dillon, I think that they definitely have like the speed of like a top 10 car, but it's like they have a hard time being able to stay up front. And if he falls back, it's hard for him to make up spots. That's what I've noticed with him. And also, there were a couple of warnings given out, and this is probably the most minor news, or maybe second most minor news out of my pre-race notes. Dale Earnhardt Jr., Kyle Busch, Carl Edwards, and Josh West were given warnings for not passing pre-race inspection or qualifying inspection at Michigan. And also, other news: Ford Racing was renamed to Ford Performance and got a new director. And I don't remember his name or what he wants exactly, but this is mainly a response to the performance of not just like Roush Fenway and other teams like that, but just like Ford as an entire whole, because even the Penske drivers have not had quite as much speed as they did a season ago. And there's only been two wins from a Ford driver, and that was very early in the season with Logano winning the 500 and Brad Keselowski winning at Auto Club. And also other news it was confirmed that the new rules package was confirmed for Kentucky and maybe even Michigan in August. Now, I think that was from a NASCAR.com article, but I'm sure that like there were some reports about how it could be used for additional races after Kentucky, but they had not been confirmed yet. But I think I saw one article that said that this could be used in Michigan. And hey, after the Michigan race 2 weeks ago, I would say let's definitely try Michigan as well. But I think that from reading and watching videos, I think that this new rules package will actually help them because it seems like that it's been what many drivers and fans have wanted to see, and hopefully that in the future, like I don't think that like this should be like the rules package that they should use for the next several years, unless it proves to be like a million times better than the rules package that we've had this year, but any previous rules package. So we'll just have to see. So I think that actually with the new rules package and so much uncertainty, I think that in some ways it could make Kentucky a little bit of a wild card as well. So Kentucky could be considered by some people like a fourth wild card race. But anyway, and probably this was probably maybe like the second biggest news story, and it was International Speedway Corporation, which is run by the France family and runs 13 racetracks, is negotiating plans to operate Mazda Raceway, also known as Laguna Seca, and I think that this is kind of like some people I know, some people mainly probably from outside the community have probably negative thoughts and think that International Speedway Corporation should not be doing this. But I think that I've heard reports about how this could ensure that the Speedway stays alive because in some ways the Speedway has kind of been struggling because I think that maybe like 10, 20 years ago it had a lot of like major racing leagues on this course and and, and one by one they've kind of all been disappearing. So I feel like that, and obviously I don't feel like that Mazda, or I think as maybe people like me like to call it more often, looking at Seika, I want to see this racetrack stay alive, whether it hosts NASCAR races or not. And that actually brings into the question of, well, if International Speedway Corporation does work out a plan, will NASCAR come there? Because the 13 tracks that the company runs, NASCAR goes there. Now, they eventually released an article about a day after this announcement or rumors about how they say that the configuration doesn't work for NASCAR, especially like the Sprint Cup and probably Xfinity Series. So chances are there probably will never ever be a Sprint Cup Series race or just NASCAR race in general, just because of the layout. Which I understand that I think that there are definitely some parts of the course that A, lack safety, and B, like some turns like the corkscrew and like some of the other serious elevation turns might, like, I think that it could make it like hard to drive and dangerous possibly. But I think that it would be cool if one day they could find a way to maybe have NASCAR at the racetrack, because I think at the racing there could be one of a kind. I think there are some things at Laguna Seca that I don't think you'll see at Sonoma or Watkins Glen. And obviously, I think many fans want to see new road courses, whether it is this track or another track. I personally would like to see Road America maybe be a road course, like how like a Sprint Cup date, um, and the Sprint Cup Series will go the same weekend as the Xfinity Series race, especially if it can replace a track that generally does not host the most exciting races like the mile and a half racetracks. So that's my thoughts on that. And I'm just gonna fine. I probably should get this out of the way before I get into what happened in the Pride Sessions qualifying. I'm not gonna talk a whole lot about the Confederate flag thing. Like I didn't write it down in my notes, but obviously it's like if you're someone who follows the news a lot, how can you not find news about the Confederate flag? It's been everywhere, whether you are a NASCAR fan or not. And to me, I don't think that my thoughts about this are things like, oh my goodness, this is such a BS story. It needs to not be out there. I think like the story, I think that there definitely should be some kind of awareness for the story. And obviously, I think that whether it is NASCAR or not NASCAR, when you go to these articles and read comment sections, or you could probably interview people from all around the country about this, and I'm sure that there's definitely going to be a lot of criticism and hate about this, especially in the NASCAR community. Like I know, like NASCAR is kind of like the punching bag for all sports, and probably has the most complainers compared to any other sport. But obviously, like first, like it was just like NASCAR in general. Like it wasn't any particular person. saying like we support South Carolina's governor on to remove the Confederate flag. And then it was the International Speedway Corporation, and then Brian France made a statement about how he would try to do like their best to maybe like remove the Confederate flag at all races. And I remember like Brad Daugherty's, I can't say this here, Brad Doherty, I think that's how you pronounce it. Jeff Gordon Jr. made comments about it as well, and I think maybe a couple of crew chiefs were all asked about it as well. Overall, I think if you read any internet comment, and I think in this case NASCAR's comment, it's just a whole lot of like, I'm done with the sport. I used to like Dale Earnhardt Jr. until he opened his mouth about this. NASCAR should stay out of politically correct or politics. Personally, my thoughts about it is I'm more curious to see what the reaction will be in weeks or a month from now. Like how will NASCAR and NASCAR drivers and the CEO's statements will affect the sport. I don't think that it's going to be like a huge loss, or I don't think it'll be looked back upon as like the thing that killed NASCAR. Like I don't think it'll be something like that, but I think it'll just be interesting to see what the response will be in a couple of weeks from now. And personally, I'm just kind of like the story itself, not just in the NASCAR world, but just everywhere. I think it's gotten like so big that I'm just ready to move on, and hopefully sometimes very soon, maybe in the next few days, this can all just die down, and we can talk, and we can spend more in the NASCAR community can spend more of its time talking about like, oh, what's happening on the track or leading up to the weekend, rather than something that's kind of like way out there when it comes to the NASCAR world. But anyway, now let's go to the weekend. So Clint Bowyer won the first practice, and one thing I'm going to start doing is now listing everyone else. Like I think that in practice sessions I will also write down where like I think in practice sessions I will write down the rest of the top 10, and in qualifying I will list the rest of the top 12, like the final round. So in the first practice, A.J. Allmendinger, Sam Horner Jr., Danica Patrick, Gene McMurray, David Reagan, Greg Biffle, Kevin Harvick, Kurt Busch, Carl Edwards. That was the rest of the top 10 in the first practice. In the second practice, that went to Kyle Busch, and then the rest of the top 10 in that group was Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Clint Bowyer, Martin Truex Jr., Jeff Gordon, Casey Kane, Sam Horner Jr., Michael McDowell, and Jimmy Johnson, and then AJ Allmendinger won the pole, his first career pole at a road course, second ever, with the first pole of his career being at Kansas, the Spring Kansas race in 2012, I believe. And the rest of that top 12 was Kurt Busch, Matt Kenseth, Kyle Larson, Jeff Gordon, Clint Bowyer, Tony Stewart, Casey Mears, David Reagan, Frank Keselowski, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. So definitely a couple of surprises there, like especially from like Matt Kenseth, who historically this is his worst career racetrack, and then a couple of surprises too, such as Tony Stewart, Casey Mears, and David Reagan. Drivers that have either had big struggles or drivers that we don't exactly think about as drivers that can do really well on road courses. And if there was rain in the area, which there was not, and I don't think that there's ever been rain in the history of the NASCAR Sonoma race, but I might be wrong. But I think that if there was rain, this would have been the first race on rain tires, and they had rain tires on hold just in case if there was that chance, but there was never a chance. I think that if the Spring Cup Series is going to be using road courses, it will be from Watkins Glen, which every now and then does have a shower every several years or a few years, And of course, I mentioned about how this is Larry McReynolds' last race in the Fox Sports booth after doing it for 15 years, and he will be moving to the Hollywood Hotel, which, anyway, I already talked about that. And now let's go forward to what happened in the race. Anyway, so Kurt Busch cleared A.J. Allmendinger in turn number 2, and Kurt Busch was the outside pole center. And then on lap 2, the top 3 had broken away from the rest of the field, that being Kurt Busch, A.J. Allmendinger, and Kyle Larson. And the Jeff Gordon was starting to move up to the field. And then while that was happening, by the time we got to lap 6 and 7, Kurt Busch had already pulled out to 1 second lead. So right out the bat, So from right off the bat, I think many fans saw that as like, okay, so once again, Kurt Busch is going to be a driver to watch out for. And Dale Earnhardt Jr. and the drivers like Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jimmy Johnson were starting to make big gains after not being in the final 12. And then on lap 9, this was the first reports of tire problems in the race, and it came from Jay McMurray, who apparently did have some kind of a tire issue. So he came in, so he came down pit road, pitting from the ninth, not the ninth, the 19th position. My goodness, I cannot exactly talk today. And leading up this weekend, there were actually a couple of tire problems, and then Goodyear said that the tire was not like that different, but apparently, like I don't exactly know a whole lot about like Goodyear tires, but I think it was like the tread in the tire might have been just a little bit different or placed in a different spot on the tire. Like I said, I don't know a whole lot about Goodyear tires, so what I'm saying to you could easily be very wrong, and hopefully you cannot hear noises in the background. But I'm sorry if you can. But anyway, so back to the race. And then already, right off the back, there was also a couple drivers that got into the dirt. I think most notably, I forget exactly who it was. Oh, right, it was Justin Allgaier who got into the dirt a couple times. And then Kurt Busch had almost a 2-second lead by lap 13. And then there were a couple drivers that were dropping positions, and I think that a couple of those drivers were having to be Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch, and Mart Jr. And I think what that caused them to do is it caused them to pit a little early. And then also, just before the first caution came out, A.J. Allmendinger, he was actually starting to close in on Kurt Busch, so maybe A.J. Allmendinger had more of the long-run car, especially on the first run. And then by lap 18, Jimmy Johnson was already moving into the top 5 after starting 13th. So Jimmy Johnson's car, once again, at this point, it looked like Jimmy Johnson, he was definitely going to have to be a driver to reckon with. And I was honestly surprised that Johnson's car was good, especially after saying many times heading into Sunday, we just don't have the speed. So, and also, this is also just not one of Johnson's. This is also just not one of Johnson's best racetracks. Like if you look at his history, like he did win in 2010, but I felt like he would not have won that if Marcus Ambrose did not make a mistake trying to save fuel going uphill. I think that race belonged to Marcus Ambrose up until he did that. Then Jimmy Johnson, who was in the second position, passed Marcus Ambrose, and NASCAR did not let Marcus Ambrose restart back at first. So overall, Jimmy Johnson's performance was very surprising for me today, even though he did not end up winning. But anyway, I mentioned about how there was a first caution approaching, or that would approach, and it was on lap number 22. David Gilliland went into the tire barrier, and this was the first time that I think a tire issue resulted in a crash. And I think that this might have actually been the only time a tire problem resulted in a crash. So it happened in turn number 10, which is one of the fastest spots of the racetrack, and he went into the tire barriers pretty hard, but he was okay. And then and then there were pit stops from drivers that did not make pit stops a couple laps before the caution came out. And then once the caution flag pit stops were completed, many drivers stayed out. In fact, the top 8 stayed out, and the top 8 was Clint Bowyer, Tony Stewart, McMurray, Kyle Busch, Ryan Newman, Justin Allgaier, Paul Menard, and Brad Keselowski. And then some of the drivers that came out were starting in like 9th and beyond, like Allmendinger, Kurt Busch, Gordon Johnson, Kenseth, and etc. And then restart on lap 27, and then Clint Bowyer got the lead. Tony Stewart started dropping because at that moment, Clint Bowyer and Tony Stewart were the only 2 drivers left on the racetrack that had not made a pit stop at all. And then 1 lap later, Kyle Busch grabbed the lead from Clint Bowyer, and so this was the first time Kyle Busch took the lead away. This was the first time that Kyle Busch took the lead away, and this would also not be the last time that these two would be battling for the lead again. But then on lap 29, the caution comes out when coming off of turn number 7, Mart Jr. and David Ragan were battling for. I think that they were battling. I don't know what position they were battling, but I think it was outside the top 10. Mart Jr. What I saw here is that Mart Jr. He did not get off turn number 7 that well, and it caused Ragan to be put in the grass. And then Ragan admitted that he turned Mart Jr. when he came back onto the racetrack on purpose, and that caused Mart Jr. to actually spin in the S's, and then hit the tire barriers also pretty hard, which actually caused a 10-minute red flag because the wall behind the tire barriers actually got moved or broke. And then this would kind of be like, and also this would also not be the first time that Reagan would eventually make contact with someone. But anyway, once the caution came out, Cooper and Tony Stewart took time to make their pit stops, and then the red flag did come out on lap 31. But then the caution flag was waved after that. I said it before, but a 10-minute red flag. And then we had a restart, lap 34, and Allgaier once again went off course for a little bit. And then A.J. Allmendinger was actually closing in on Kyle Busch as pit stops were approaching. But then before Allmendinger could take the lead, Kurt Busch was actually closing in on the top two. Kurt Busch passes Allmendinger on lap 39, and then Kurt Busch takes the lead from his younger brother Kyle Busch on lap 40. And then also Jimmy Johnson was starting to get up in the battle for the lead on lap 41, but then Kurt Busch was able to pull away before Johnson got to his bumper. And then also on lap 44, another tire problem, and this one did not bring out a caution, which this was probably the only time in the race where I thought, like, NASCAR, I wonder why you didn't throw out the caution, because Kenseth lost a left rear tire through the S's, and there was definitely like pieces coming off of his tire. Some of them I think did go into the dirt, which if all of the pieces went into the dirt, then I can understand not throwing a caution. But I thought I saw some pieces were. Sorry, I thought I did see some pieces go into stay on the racetrack, and when I saw that, I thought, okay, NASCAR's gonna have caution, but they didn't have the caution, so Matt had to run up the road, and that would be pretty costly at the moment. And then also at the same time, this was also the first time that we saw Kevin Harvick really be someone that they might as well also reckon with, and that was fourth position. Harvick overall did not really have like a strong car, and I kind of feel like that. And I kind of felt like that while fourth place is definitely not bad, I think that because Harvick can perform just a little bit more better, like lead laps and contend for the win, it just didn't seem like it was that strong at Sonoma for some reason. And then also this is where we saw a couple more pit stops, and this would kind of be the cycle of what would be an extremely long cycle of green flag pit stops, starting with Newman, Kyle Busch in lap 50, and then a couple laps later, Kurt Busch, Allmendinger came up the road, and that allowed Jimmy Johnson to take the lead. And Johnson would actually be the leader for a very long time. I think he stayed out up until he got the lead on lap 52, and then he stayed out until lap 67. And basically, it wasn't just Johnson. There were many drivers that stayed out for a longer period of time than what some might have expected, like Carl Edwards, Clint Boyer, Joe Logano, Greg Biffle. I think that they were all staying out to ensure that they can make it on at least one more pit stop, whereas drivers like Kurt Busch and Allmendinger, they would have to pit at least twice. And that was actually the strategy that helped Carl Edwards win Sonoma a season ago. And also, just before Johnson did come in on pit road, there was once again another moment that kind of brought the caution, and that was Justin Allgaier. He was off the pace, and apparently he was out of gas, and he ran out of gas in the S's. And while he did not make it to his pit box, he sort of kind of got he was on pit road, and then he pulled off pit road out of the racing service. So that's why they didn't throw out the caution. But it was probably the closest moment we got to a caution up until several laps later. Actually, it wasn't several laps. Actually, it was not several laps. It was actually a couple laps after that, because in lap 74, caution number 3, when J.G. smacks the outside wall in turn number 10. Turn number 10 ended up being the trouble spot all day long, which kind of surprised me, because I thought that turns 7 and 11 would be much more bigger trouble spots than turn 10. And this did bring out our third caution of the race after a very long green flag run for Sonoma, or road courses in general. And at the moment, Kurt Busch was the leader. Jimmy Johnson was currently in, I think, third position. And then for drivers that were going to have to make it on 2 pit stops anyway, like Kurt Busch, A.J. Allmendinger, I actually skipped ahead here. Allmendinger, back on lap 61, had to make an unscheduled pit stop because of fuel pressure issues, which apparently, I guess something was wrong with the fuel box, which would take him out of the race, but he also had to go behind the wall. So his day was over, and now Allmendinger is going to have to hope that he can get it at Watkins Glen. Or if he's not going to win at a road course this season, then he's going to win the race based on fuel knowledge. To me, that's the only that's the only time other than winning a road course that I see Allmendinger winning a race and thus getting into the chase. But that really sucked because maybe he didn't have the winning car, but I think he had a car that could have helped him get like a top 5 finish, and I feel like that for him and that team, getting a top 5 in a season where you're getting like top when you're getting finishes probably outside the top 15, 20 most of the time, I think just even getting like a top 5 can be really helpful and beneficial to your team. But hopefully, I wish them and hope that they can definitely be winning contenders when they get to Watkins Glen, or maybe even a track that we don't expect them to win, like Daytona, which is next week. So, yeah, so I apologize for skipping ahead. So after that cycle of caution flag pit stops after the Yaley incident, Jimmy Johnson were getting the lead, and actually, in fact, the entire top 13 stayed out, and those 13 drivers were Johnson, Boyer, Logano, Larson, Kyle Busch, David Reagan, Carl Edwards, Tony Stewart, Ryan Newman, Greg Biffle, Eric Almirola, and Danica Patrick. Those were the 13 drivers that did stay out. And then we had a restart. And then after that restart, heading into the S's, Carl Edwards and David Reagan battling for 7th position. Carl Edwards gets over the curb and slams right into Reagan, and then both of them go into the outside wall and just tear up both of the cars. Both of them will be out of the race, including a sort of scary moment when Reagan, when he tried to get his car back rolling, it actually caught on fire. And then Edwards admitted that it was his fault, but I think, to me, the thing about this crash after it happened was David Reagan's interview. To me, David Reagan was kind of, to me, just a little like overconfident. And hold on for a second. I'm sorry. I had to turn on my light. It was getting pretty dark here in Arizona. But anyway, Reagan's interview after that crash, like when they interviewed him about what happened between him and Mart Jr., I felt like that Reagan kind of, to me, was a little overconfident. Well, not a little overconfident, very overconfident, and just kind of felt maybe just a little too strong. In my opinion, this is just my opinion. Your opinion could be a different. But in my opinion, I thought that Reagan was very overconfident and just kind of maybe just a little too strong about what he thinks happened between him and Truex. Like, he thinks that Truex ran him off the racetrack, and when I don't think that was exactly the case, especially with how early in the race he was going. And I felt like that even several laps later, he was still very confident about him wrecking Mart Jr. And I kind of felt like that. I don't think like that interview is really going to help him, especially if you're not a Reagan fan. It didn't really help for me. Like, I don't generally I don't really like Reagan that much. I just kind of feel like that through the several years he's been in the Cup Series, other than his 2 Super Speedway wins, which both races were won in pretty amazing fashion, I would say. Other than that, I don't think Reagan has really done pretty much like anything. And the thing is, you can even give him like. And the thing is, with him being on when he was on Joe Gibbs, he still was the same David Reagan. He was still kind of performing like he was when he was on Roush or Front Row Motorsports. So to me, it seems like that Reagan, it doesn't really matter the ride. It's just that Reagan just doesn't really. He doesn't seem to really have like the talent to even finish inside like the top 15 or 10, sometimes even the top 20. So overall, to me, that interview with Reagan really, for me and many other fans, did not help or maybe like him a little more. But anyway, now we have to get back up. Now we have to focus our attention back onto what happened on the racetrack. And so we had a restart lap 85, and then Johnson, who was the leader, cleared Clint Boyer, and then Clint Boyer and Kyle Busch were staying with Jimmy Johnson for a moment, and then Kyle Busch actually got by Clint Boyer, and for a moment it did look like Kyle Busch was catching Jimmy Johnson by the time we got to lap 90, but then from there on, Kyle Busch was sliding back, and then Jimmy Johnson was just like his lead was just growing. And the thing is, I think that at this moment in the race, the two drivers that I think could give him a run for his money were Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kurt Busch. But the thing is, both of those drivers were in traffic. Like it was very easy for Kurt Busch. To pass drivers, but for Junior, it was definitely one hell of a battle between him and Tony Stewart for about like sixth position. But it was like it took so many laps for Junior to get by Stewart, and I don't actually know if he ever got by him. So Junior was definitely having some major problems passing drivers late in the race. And then Kurt Busch, 11.97, he was actually making gains on Jimmy Johnson. And the thing is, what really hurt him was the fact about how he actually got off in the grass in turn 10 trying to drive it. He was driving, I would say he was driving it a little too hard, getting into the corner, and that caused him to get into the grass. And I felt like that if the race had stayed green from there on, Jimmy Johnson would have won, and Kurt Busch would not have been able to really gain much, just because there was debris on his tires, but also a lot of grass on his grill, which might have resulted in engine failure if we did not get the caution number 5, and that is when Casey Mears lost a wheel and axle on, I think it was his left rear tire, and all of a sudden this tire just starts. It's kind of like rolling and flying down the racetrack, coming towards the start finish line, and it actually hits a fence right in the middle of the track, right where the drag strip, is on the racetrack. And that was by far like I think it's been a while since I've seen like a situation where driver lost the wheel and axle all by himself, like no contact. But to me that really sucked for Casey Mears, just because I felt like that he qualified 8th, and he actually did a pretty good job of staying up in there up until later in that first green flag run. But I think Mears could have finished inside the top 10, and I felt like that for a non-super speedway, that would have been very incredible for me, just because Mears really has not just had, like, I think it's been like years since Mears like had like maybe not exactly like winning cars, but just like top 5 and top 10 cars. And so that kind of sucked for him, and hopefully maybe the good run he had before Sonoma can help him later on in the season, especially at Daytona. But anyway, on lap 100, it's an interesting pit strategy right here. So here's the thing. There are 5 drivers that stayed out: Jimmy Johnson, Jamie McMurray, Jeff Gordon, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and Matt Kenseth. Those 5 drivers stayed out. But I think the key driver right here was Jimmy Johnson, because he was the leader, and everyone else came down pit road. And after the way things were on the running order after the pit stops, I thought to myself, well, I don't think those pit stops are really going to make much of a distance, because A, Johnson has just had a really strong car all day long, and B, there are drivers like Clint Boyer and Kyle Busch are going to have to pass. And I don't know, with less than 10 laps to go, if they're going to have time. But clearly I would be wrong, because we had a restart on lap 140, so just 6 more laps to go. And already in the S's, there were many different things happening. Like, I think it was like Dan Kirkpatrick spun, I think, and Biffle got into someone, even though they never showed it. He had to make several pit stops, and I think Justin Marks and someone else had also made some contact at some point in the S's. But there was a lot in the S's that unfortunately the cameras could not pick up on, and so that kind of sucked. But anyway, we stayed green, and then already 1 lap after the restart, Kyle Busch got up to second, and then as they approached on lap 106, Kyle Busch was actually catching Jimmy Johnson. And when this was all going on, it first caught me off guard, just because really ever since Johnson got the lead, we did not really see someone like who had a faster car to actually be up against Jimmy Johnson here. And plus, so far this season, it's been like once Johnson got the lead, no one could ever catch him. So that moment caught me off guard, along with many other fans, I think. And so one lap later, lap 106, Kyle Busch passed Jimmy Johnson, and then Cliff Bowyer was able to take second, like a couple turns later. And then Kurt Busch was actually able to get into third place, I think, one lap later. So by lap 107, it was a 3-horse race between Kyle Busch, Cliff Bowyer, and Kurt Busch. And I felt like that at that moment. I was like, man, I wouldn't say that all three of these drivers were equally good, but it did kind of feel like that. It's like, oh my goodness, who is going to win this thing? And like a lap later, Kyle Busch pulled away from Cliff Bowyer, and then Kurt Busch struggled to get by Cliff Bowyer, which I felt like that would eventually really cost him the victory later on, because Kurt Busch did get past Cliff Bowyer on lap 109, but at that point, Kyle Busch had, I think, pulled out to like a second and a half lead over Kurt Busch, and I think that entering turn 11 on the final lap, Kurt Busch was maybe like 0.6 of a second behind Kyle Busch. So I think Kurt Busch needed another lap or two to really be able to catch and pass Kyle Busch. And I felt like if the race was a lap or two longer, or it would have been quite an interesting battle. But anyway, coming off of turn number 11, Kyle Busch was the first driver to see the checkered flag, and he would go on to win. This is his first career win of 2015, and now all four Joe Gibbs Racing drivers, despite not exactly being the best team, now all have wins, which is I think the first organization to do that, the first multi-car team organization. And also, this was the first time ever in NASCAR history that the Busch brothers finished 1-2. And what's kind of interesting is how last week in Michigan, Kurt Busch won the race and Kyle Busch finished dead last. And also Kyle Busch, with him being a winner back in 2008, he broke the streak of 10 races and 10 different winners. And I felt like that, like I kind of like I didn't think that Kyle Busch would be the one to break the streak. Like I thought like it was going to be either Johnson or Kurt Busch. Especially once Allmendinger was out of the picture. And of course, obviously, Cliff Bowyer, he won in 2012. Kurt Busch won in 2011. Behind them, actually, Kevin Harvick, he's actually never won at Sonoma. So he was the highest finishing driver that had not ever won at Sonoma. So he came really close, but I don't think Harvick would have had the car even if he was right on the bumper of the Busch brothers. And so that streak was broken, and I kind of feel like, even though the streak is probably going to be forgotten in the next couple days and eventually in like a year from now, most likely, I think that a streak of 10 races, I think that a streak of 10 races, 10 different winners, seeing how much the car has changed from 2005 to 2014, I think that is probably one of the most incredible streaks I can recall seeing when it comes to not just like NASCAR track. When it comes to not just NASCAR tracks, but NASCAR in general. And what else? Oh, right. And so obviously this has been in the news pretty much ever since NASCAR, not NASCAR, ever since Kyle Busch announced he would be returning back to NASCAR. It was announced a day later about how NASCAR will give him the waiver of how, even though he's missed 11 races, if he can win a race and get inside the top 30, he will be in the chase. And currently, if you go to the chase grid after Sonoma, it does have him on the chase grid, and obviously I think that has caused a little bit of controversy with some people saying like, hey, Kyle Busch is not in the top 30, don't put him in the chase grid yet. I think that when it comes to Kyle Busch's chances of making the top 30, I think that yes, Kyle Busch is a better driver than some of the drivers that are around the top 30, like Cole Witt, Charles Bain, Justin Allgaier. Like I think Kyle Busch is definitely like miles ahead of all of the drivers in terms of just talent and good equipment. But I think that when it comes like can Kyle Busch make the top 30 after Sonoma, he has to average a 14th spot or better for the remaining regular season races. And to me, can Kyle Busch do that? I could see him doing that. Like Kyle Busch definitely, like, especially like when I think back to a year like 2008, Kyle Busch is clearly capable of having like championship like runs, having top 5 and top 10 cars very consistently. But to me, it feels like that, especially so far this season, and it's been very up and down. It's been up and down for Kyle Busch, whether it was his fault or not. Like when I think about it, like he first got his first top 10 at Pocono, but the week before that, he got collected in a wreck with Brian Scott. And last week in Michigan, whether you think it was the rain or not, Kyle Busch got loose, hit the outside wall, finished dead last. So I think with that being said, and now that he has this win, you clearly can definitely see, if you were to look at his finishes, very up and down. And so because of that, that's why I'm not going to say that he's definitely going to be in the top 30. If he did not get involved in the Brian Scott situation at Dover or did not hit the wall at Michigan, I think that, and if those finishes were like like a top 5 or top 10 or even better, I would have definitely have said, oh yeah, Kyle Busch, he's making that, just because he's performed very consistent ever since coming back. But I think that Kyle Busch can he make it? Can he make it? I can see him making it, but I just don't think it's guaranteed. But I think that overall, when I think back to Kyle Busch, it was just a little more than 4 months ago. He was I think either in the hospital or just coming out of the hospital after breaking one leg and one foot in an Xfinity Series wreck at Daytona. And to see him come back, especially when you compare his comeback compared to Hamilton's comeback and Stewart's comeback, it's definitely like super impressive. And I think that Kyle Busch, he definitely is back in NASCAR. I just think that at some point, hopefully, even though it may not be exactly his fault, I would like to hopefully see him stop the bleeding and maybe be the Kyle Busch that he was in 2008, which is consistent top 5 and top 10 every single week and no problems. But anyway, that is the race at Sonoma, and my goodness, this race review has already gone on for a very long time. So now I'm just going to go over the finishing order very quickly. So from first to 41st, Kyle Busch won the race. Kurt Busch second, Clint Bowyer third, Kevin Hart fourth, Logano fifth, Jimmy Johnson sixth, Dale Jr. finished seventh, Casey Kane eighth, Brian Newman ninth, Sam Horvath Jr. 10th, Danny McRae 11th, Tony Stewart 12th, Eric Palmer 13th, Eric Almirola 14th, Kyle Larson 15th, Gordon finished 16th, Austin Dillon 17th, Danny Hamlin 18th, Brett Keselowski 19th, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. finished 20th, Matt Kenseth 21st, Cole Budd 22nd, Jared Bain 23rd, 24th was Danica Patrick, 25th was Alex Kennedy, 26th was Boris Say, 27th, Greg Biffle, Josh Wise finished 28th, Matthew Van Dalen finished 29th, the 30th position went to Justin Marks, 31 was Alex Bowman, who I think about 24 hours ago announced that he will be back with Tommy Baldwin Racing for 2016. So good for him. Jeff Burton, 32nd. 33rd was Michael Annett. 34th was Michael McDowell. 35th was Justin Allgaier. 36th, Landon Castle. 37th, AJ Allmendinger. 38th, Casey Mears. 39th, David Reagan. 40th, Carl Edwards. 41st, J.J. Yeley. 42nd, Mark Truex Jr. 43rd, David Gilliland. So I guess very quickly I will address like who impressed me, surprised me, or made me happy to see where they finished, and who made me sad or who disappointed me. I think I was like, I think I would be lying if I said I was not impressed with Kyle Busch, because I think Kyle Busch's win was definitely impressive. So that's, to me, at the top of the list. But also maybe the finishes by some drivers that really we're not talking a whole lot about today. Like look at this, Sam Horvath Jr. I actually did not realize up until I went through the finishing order that he finished 10th. So good run for him. I'm impressed by that. I also think that even though he had a much better car for this, I think that Tony Stewart, he did finish 12th, but I think he could have finished 5th. And so hopefully, like, that good run that he had and hopefully the good run that he had today will hopefully help him just like be happy and look forward to the next several weeks. I don't think he'll be making the chase this season unless he gets maybe super lucky or things turn out his way and wins. But I think that hopefully today's good run hopefully Tony Stewart's good run will hopefully help him. I think that when it comes to other drivers, who else impressed me? Kind of not really anyone else, to be honest with me. So obviously, I did talk about some of my drivers that I was sad or disappointed to see. Allmendinger, Mears, I think definitely at the top of the list. Jeff Gordon restarted in the 3rd position, and I felt like that maybe would hold him up a little bit, and then what caused him to get past was obviously, yes, Gordon did not have as fresh tires, but I did not really expect that. And honestly, I did not really think that within less than 10 laps, Gordon would go from 3rd to 16th. And I think that Gordon some would say that it's the pit crew. Some would say that it's the distraction of Gordon's final year. And obviously, yes, I have talked about this before on race review. But I think that to me, while I could say it is the Alan Gustafson um, and a crew chief or the distraction, I think it's just because like Gordon, just like Tony Stewart, and Tony Stewart did admit to not liking the rules package. I think Gordon really has not been able to just get a good grip at this rules package, and now after going to all different types of racetracks, and now that we're in race 16, yeah, this race was race 16. I'm going to have to change the description. I think that like 16 races in, and Gordon has had pretty much like, even though he might have like top 5 cars at certain moments in the race, he seems to be getting like, he seems to end up finding himself finishing around like 15th or 20th. So, I mean, I hope that Gordon can turn his season around. Like, I think Gordon can definitely still win. I just think that whatever issues in, like, hopefully they can solve it quickly, and they can go back to being the Jeff Gordon that we saw in 2012. You know, that very consistent finisher, like top 5 car, and went out to win 4 races. Hopefully, even though I'm not a fan of Gordon, I hope that we can definitely see that soon. Other drivers that disappointed me, I don't know. I'm looking at this right here. I was kind of a little sad to see Greg Biffle finish in the position that he was, because I think that at one point he was inside the top 10, and he stayed there for, I think, many laps, and obviously he did show quite a bit of speed in the practice sessions as well. So that kind of made me sad. I think Carl Edwards, he was in the 8th position just before he got involved in the wreck with David Reagan. I felt like that if that did not happen, he could have gone a nice top 10, maybe even top 5. So that made me sad. But I guess that's pretty much everyone that. So I guess that's all I have to say about the finishing order. And I guess when it comes to the point standings, if Kyle Busch does make it into the top 30, which I'll say again, I don't think it's guaranteed that he will, he would definitely be knocking out the lowest driver on points, and that driver is Ryan Newman. No, wait a second. It's actually not Ryan Newman. It's actually, wait a second. Is it? Oh, okay, yeah, it is. No, wait a second. I think it's like, wait a second. I think currently right now, Alan Rolla would be the last driver that make it into the chase, virtue on points. But if Kyle Busch were to make it in the chase, it would knock Almirola out, and so Ryan Newman would be the last driver on the double spot. And actually, when you look at the distance between Bowyer and Almirola, it's actually only separated by 1 point. So if Bowyer can continue the momentum, he may not only get inside the top 16, but he might actually gain gains towards the top 12. And I think that if we're close to being inside the top 12 in wins, you will most likely make it in on points. But I think that now with Kyle Busch having the win, it will be interesting. I think Kyle Busch will definitely have to be watching out for him these next several races. But anyway, now we're gonna have to shift the focus to next week at Daytona. So next week at Daytona is the second time we will be going to Daytona after the Daytona 500. And if you remember, back in the Daytona 100, I felt like it definitely had a lot of exciting moments, especially in the last 10 laps where before the green line checkered, they were 3 wide, like I think like several rows deep. And they were 3 wide for the lead. They were 3 wide for 4th place. They were 3 wide for 7th place, and so on. And hopefully, I think that we can definitely see that as opposed to what we saw in Talladega, where it ended up being like a train up until like 2 laps to go. And also, this is also going to be a pretty, I guess you could say, historical week for NASCAR. Also, just because of the fact of how NASCAR on NBC is returning after their last race being the 2006 Homestead race. And when I look at the drivers in the booth, like, okay, before I get into that, I might as well just say like what I think NASCAR on NBC will do. I have watched NASCAR America, and definitely I will be watching the pre-race shows of the Xfinity race and the Cup race to see what they will bring to the table. And to me, I picture NBC to maybe not like I think like NASCAR and Fox. It's kind of more like maybe like I wouldn't say that like NASCAR and Fox is like 100% sport. I think it's also like a little bit of like entertainment as well. I don't see NBC being exactly like entertainment or incorporating a lot of entertainment. I think NBC will be more focused on the racing, and I think that it was like that when NASCAR on NBC was doing races, um, several weeks, from 2001 to 2006, as far as what I've seen through the clips. Like, I was not watching NASCAR when NBC was doing it from 1999 to 2006. My first year watching NASCAR was 2007, which was the Fox, TNT, and ESPN/ABC era. So I never got a taste of what they exactly did. But I think that, to me, I predict that they will be not exactly as entertaining and hopefully more focused on the race. I'll be interested to see what kind of like technology they will bring to the table, such as like uh, what like the ticker will be and etc. Stuff like that. But anyway, as far as let's take a look at the broadcast booth. So in the broadcast booth, we have and this is just for the Cup races, not the Xfinity races or any other series, just for the Cup races. You have Rick Brown. We have what? Wait, what? You have Rick Allen as the lap by lap announcer. So basically, he's like Mike Joy. And then you have Jeff Burton and Steve Letarte as the color analyst, and Rick Allen for the. And some people might remember about how from 2003 to 2014, after Eldora, Rick Allen was the lap by lap announcer of truck races, and Jeff Burton and Steve Letarte will be new to this. And so overall in the booth, it is a completely fresh new. It is a completely fresh new. How am I gonna say this? Basically, it's just a whole new. It's gonna be a fresh new look, and I think that Rick Allen is going to do a good job. I definitely liked him when he was doing truck races. Like to me, like his voice is definitely like attention grabber. And I think that even like when things might get a little sleepy, I think that he can still be able to grab your attention. As far as Jeff Brand and Steve Letarte, I like how they chose and I like how they chose a driver and a crew chief that recently just sort of retired or I think that they are retired. Like Jeff Burton, his last full Cup Series season was 2013. Ran a couple of races like last season, and then Steve Letarte was a crew chief up until the end of 2014. So I think that having these two people coming up, being involved as either a driver or a crew chief, I think that will help them as well. And as far as the pre-race show here, as far as I know, there are three. There's going to be three. There's going to be a trio. Is Chris Devoda, Kyle Petty, Dale Jarrett. And I think as far as these three people, I think these three will definitely do a good job. I definitely like all three of these people. I don't really have anything against them. And Rutledge Wood is apparently going to be the reporter. Now, as far as the pit reporters, there's Dave Burns, Kelly Stravest, Marty Snyder, Mike Massaro, and those are the four people. I think that I don't know who Kelly Stavast is, so I don't know what she's gonna exactly bring. And hopefully I do like Dave Burns and Marty Snyder. That's Marty Snyder. Yeah, I'm actually looking at pictures of him to be sure that I can remember him. Yeah, I think I like Dave Burns. I like Marty Snyder. I don't really have much of an opinion on Mike Massaro, in my opinion. I feel like that as far as I can remember, he was probably my least favorite reporter on when he was doing ESPN. So yeah, that's all I really gotta say. And as far as a driver that can do good at Daytona, once again, I will say that Daytona is indeed a wild card. I think it'll probably be the biggest wild card of them all in the regular season, just because literally anyone has a chance to win. Up until the big one happens, which I'm sure a big one will happen at some point. Driver To pick to win. I don't think I'm going to go out on a limb and pick a driver from an undefined team or a driver that we don't expect to win, even though that did happen last season with Eric Almirola, and there were many other drivers that were on sort of undefined teams that did get best career finishes in that race a season ago. I'm just gonna go on a limb and say like I think that it will be. I'm just gonna pick Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jimmy Johnson. Those are my top two picks. My top two picks. I think those two drivers have really been able. I think that they've been really good on super speedways, especially Jimmy Johnson. It seemed like several years ago, Jimmy Johnson was just kind of known as a driver that had a really hard time even finishing super speed races. But it feels like in the past few years, ever since the Gen 6 car, they've been able to be super speedway contenders. But anyway, after this, I think what has been over an hour or maybe even over an hour of doing a race review, which makes this the longest race review I've ever done. Thank you for watching, and hopefully future ones will not be as long, but like I said, there was just so much I had to cover and so much I wanted to get out that it was going to be this long, and I kind of knew that heading into this, but just thank you for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, and bye.